Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha with Ice Cream Fitness here, and I just want to address the video that I made yesterday on overtraining and clarify a couple points because there seems to be some confusion there. But hold on, let me give you guys a bicep shot first. First of all, some people seem to think I was saying there isn't overtraining when there clearly is. It is clinically defined by sports physicians. This is something that can be diagnosed as an actual medical syndrome. It isn't something you do, just like saying, can I AIDS? No, you can't AIDS. You can develop AIDS, but you can't AIDS. So you can't overtrain. You can develop an overtrained condition. And it's a chronic condition. And so when someone says, I overtrained, I trained every day for 2 weeks and I overtrained, well, I'm not going to call you a moron, but I will say that you do not know what overtraining means. And it is, in fact, biologically impossible to reach an overtraining state in only 2 weeks. It pretty much can't be done, to my knowledge. Even if you trained for 10 hours a day, you spent 10 hours a day in the weight room every day for those 2 weeks, that still would not induce chronic overreaching. It takes months to reach that state. You can't do it that fast. What you did was that you exceeded your recovery capacity a little bit, and you probably got inflamed connective tissue from the ultra high training frequency and workload that you didn't adapt to yet, and therefore you saw a reduction in performance by your nervous system backing off in order to prevent injury. Now, most of the recommendations I make for natural lifters, when I say that a natural bodybuilder shouldn't be lifting weights more than 4 days a week, it's not because of overtraining. It is the risk of overuse injuries. It is the potential for extra connective tissue inflammation that may inhibit your ability to progress because your nervous system will reduce how hard it will contract muscle fibers, oftentimes when there's connective tissue inflammation, to help prevent injuries. And 3, because you're not going to grow any faster. Now, it is possible for strength athletes to gain strength. Some of them, not everybody. There's genetic differences. But for the majority of people who are seeking purely hypertrophy, you are not going to elicit extra hypertrophy if you train 5 or 6 days a week for the next year versus only 4. Now, you might get a little stronger if you spend 5 days a week squatting or focusing on key important lifts and you're doing those over and over. You might get better neural adaptations. You might learn better motor patterns for the movements on those lifts and get stronger, but you won't necessarily induce more hypertrophy. And people forget there is a limited amount of hypertrophy that you can induce in a given time period, in a given week or month. And training beyond that threshold is not necessarily going to make you grow any faster. There are limits. There's diminished returns up to a threshold, and there are absolute limits as well. And so training beyond that may not do anything. So that's what we're getting into, is that the extra days are not going to make you grow any faster. They could have some potential negatives. They're not necessarily going to make you overtrain, but they may not have any benefits to you. And that's the reason I say that. But it is mainly an issue of connective tissue inflammation, and that is my number one concern with oftentimes natural lifters, and particularly bodybuilders who aren't necessarily going to grow. Now, a very small minority genetically can grow off of even higher frequencies like that, but they're genetic freaks. They're the exception to the rule. They're not the norm. And that's part of the problem we get into with stuff when people get advice from people who are the true genetic freaks, and they give bad advice to people because their responses and the way that their bodies adapt, they can adapt to doing some really stupid, moronic, and bad training and still develop amazing physiques and impressively aesthetic physiques while training like a moron and in a way that's not going to work for 90% of the population because of their genetics. So you've got to put that in perspective. But as far as this other thing goes, you need to remember that those are my concerns. It's not overtraining that I'm concerned with. And the other thing is, as far as increasing work capacity, you shouldn't increase this stuff dramatically. You shouldn't go from training 3 days a week to 6 days a week overnight. You need to adapt gradually, and what you will find is that, yes, the ability to adapt to higher and higher workloads and higher training frequencies can be developed. And we know this from even watching people with manual labor. By most people's standards who believe that overtraining is easy to reach, the average person with a manual labor job should be overtraining. And I've known people, because of the work I originally did when I first finished high school, working for my father's company that he is in upper management for, I worked around guys who do hard manual labor, harder than most of you guys can imagine, industrial mechanics. And some of these guys work 60-hour weeks doing this. And they're moving heavy, heavy parts. Some of the stuff in the wrenches, some of the wrenches that they use are 100 pounds. They're lifting 80, 90, 100-pound parts, sometimes 50 times in a day. And they do this, some of them, for 60 hours a week. And some of them, after 10 years of doing this, have better physiques, and I hate to say it, than 3/4 of my subscribers. Some of them look like natural bodybuilders. And they don't lift weights. And they don't overtrain. And they do this day in, day out, and they don't complain about being sore. They don't really get that tired. A lot of them go out and party after they work. So it does go to show you that the body can adapt to large amounts of workloads. And then I've known some of the guys who do work like that who go work out after work. They will work these 12-hour shifts doing manual labor, and then they'll go hit the gym for 30 minutes or an hour afterwards and lift weights. And those guys look pretty impressive. I've known a couple of them who did that, and they didn't have overtraining problems, and it worked out for them. But this is stuff that they've built up gradually over the years. And that's my recommendation. You can increase your work capacity over time. Just don't try to do it too quickly, or you will run back into the other issues of inflammation problems and stalls and all sorts of other issues. That's your real concern, not necessarily overtraining, because you simply cannot overtrain in a short period of time. You're not going to overtrain if you miss 3 deloads in a row in a training program most of the time. You're going to stall, you're going to have connective tissue issues, inflammation issues, but you're not necessarily going to reach an overtrained state. Alright guys, so I hope that clarified those points, and that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you next time.